Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So last Saturday, the class was cancelled. So the last thing that we took 2 weeks ago is the statement of the author rahimahullah ta'ala, اعلموا أن الإسلام هو السنة والسنة هي الإسلام ولا يقوم أحدهما إلا بالآخر. He said, know and realize that Islam is the Sunnah and the Sunnah is Islam, and one of them cannot be established without the other. For those who were here, what was the significance of the statement اعلموا? What was the significance? What's the point of the author saying اعلموا? Know or realize? Yes. ما فائدة كلمة اعلموا؟ The Sheikh Fawzan, he said كلمة للإهتمام. Alright, this is it's a word to get your attention. It's a word to draw your attention for the speech that comes after that. أن الإسلام هو السنة والسنة هي الإسلام. Islam is the Sunnah and vice versa. And one of them cannot be established without the other. So it's impossible for a person to say that they're a Muslim and they don't follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we gave examples, numerous examples. If a person was just to rely upon the Quran when it comes to the acts of worship, the prayer, as-salah, siyam, zakat, hajj, so on and so forth, you're not going to find the details of these acts of worship in the Quran. You're going to find generalities. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, so on and so forth. The commandment to do it, but in terms of the detail on how you do it, then the only way is by the Sunnah. So a person cannot neglect the Sunnah, he cannot neglect Islam, and likewise he cannot neglect the Sunnah. You have to combine between both of them. So the portion that we're taking tonight, قال المؤلف رحمه الله, and who's the author of this work? Who's the author? Abu Mujahid. من المؤلف؟ لا لا al-Barbahārī. So the author is Imam al-Barbahārī. The explainer or the commentator is Shaykh Fawzan. قال المؤلف رحمه الله فمن السنة لزوم الجماعة. So the author rahimahullah, he said, a part of the Sunnah is adhering to al-Jamā'ah. Al-Jamā'ah. فمن رغب غير الجماعة وفارقها فقد خلع ربقة الإسلام من عنقه. Whoever desires other than the Jama'ah, whoever desires other than al-Jama'ah, and he abandons them, then he has loosened up or he has thrown off the noose. The noose. Alright, it's like a loop. He has thrown this off of his neck. The loop of Islam from his neck. We're going to explain what that means. وَكَانَ ضَالًا مُضِلًّا. And he is a person who is astray and he leads others astray. So in the explanation or the commentary, فَمِنَ السُنَّةِ لُزُومُ الْجَمَاعَةِ. A part of the Sunnah is adhering to the Jama'ah. Shaykh Fawzan, he says, مَا دَامَ الْأَمْرُ كَذَلِكَ. As long as the situation is like this. وَأَنَّ الْإِسْلَامُ هُوَ السُّنَّةُ وَالسُّنَّةُ هِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ. Islam is the Sunnah and the Sunnah is Islam, as it was already mentioned. فَالسُّنَّةُ أَنْوَاعٌ. The Sunnah is of different types. فَمِنَ السُّنَّةِ لُزُومُ الْجَمَاعَةِ أي لُزُومُ جَمَاعَةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. So a part of the Sunnah, we all say that we're Sunni Muslims. So a part of that is adhering to al-Jama'ah. This means that you adhere to the main body of Muslims. The main body of Muslims. وَالْمُرَادْ بِالْجَمَاعَةِ هُنَا جَمَاعَةُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ الَّذِينَ عَلَى الْحَقِّ. What's intended right here, and this is important that we pay attention to the explanation of these terminologies. Because when you hear the al-Jama'ah, the main body of Muslims, perhaps a person might think that means, the biggest group of Muslims in your locality. the biggest masjid in your area. So these are, in some people's minds, they think that this is the jama'ah. So therefore they should go to that masjid because it's the biggest masjid. Or they should hang or be around these Muslims because they have the biggest numbers with them. That's not what's intended. Al-jama'ah, or the main body of Muslims, are the Muslims who are upon the truth. Shaykh Fawzan, he says, أما الجماعات التي ليست على الحق فهذه لا تسمى الجماعة الحقيقية. As for those other groups, those different sects, those different factions that are not upon the truth, then they are not called the true jama'ah. كل جماعة اجتمعت على ضلالة أو على منهج مخالف للإسلام أو على طريقة مخالفة للإسلام فلا تسمى الجماعة الحقيقية المطلوبة الممدوحة. So every jama'ah, every sect, every group, every faction who comes together upon misguidance or upon a methodology that goes against Islam, then this is not called the true jama'ah. That is praiseworthy. What are some examples of jama'at, of different sects and different factions? What are some examples of jama'at, different sects and different groups? Huh? A Shia. Huh?
The mazahib is the four mazahib.
The madahib. We're not going to say the madahib unless a person perhaps is muta'assib, if they are fanatical. But in general, there's nothing wrong with following a madhab as long as you're not fanatical. Huh? Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun. Alright? The Muslim Brotherhood. Who else? The list is a long list. It should be like As-Sufiyya. Who else? 5%? 5%? I mean, they're not even Muslim. Jama'at al-Tabligh. Al-Batiniyya. Okay. Right. The Khawarij. Who? Taliban? You doing that because they're here? Because there are Afghani brothers in here? Taliban, okay. There's the list, it goes on and on. The Khawarij, Sufiyya, Jama'at al-Tabligh. It goes on and on. Sururiyya. It's a long list. So these are jama'at. These are sects and different factions. They're not upon the truth. They're not upon the truth. فالجماعة المرادة هنا هم أهل الحق. Right? What's intended by al-jama'ah right here are the people who are upon the truth. وليس من لازم ذلك أن يكونوا كثيرين. That's very, very important. Because what I just mentioned, some people, they think of al-jama'ah as the biggest group of Muslims in your area. Right? Such and such masjid, they have the biggest masjid, they have the biggest amount of congregants that come to that masjid, so that's where everybody should be going, because that's the jama'ah. That's not a condition. He says it's not a necessity that they are a lot in number. بل لو كان واحدا على الحق فإنه يسمى جماعة. Even if the person is by himself, he's one person, and he's upon the truth, then he's called the jama'ah. What's the proof and evidence for that? Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, he said, الجماعة ما وافق الحق ولو كنت وحدا. The jama'ah is that which is in accordance to the truth, even if you're by yourself. That's the guideline, that you're upon the truth, even if you're by yourself. فالجماعة هي من كان على الحق. So, as we already said, al-jama'ah are those who are upon the truth. قَلَّ أَهْلُهُ أَوْ كَثُرُوا. Even if they're small in number, or they're few in number, or they're many in number. فَتَلْزَمُ مَنْ كَانَ عَلَى الْحَقِّ. So adhere to those who are upon the truth. وَلَا تُخَالِفِ الْجَمَاعَةَ الَّتِي عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Don't go against that group of Muslims, that main body of Muslims who are upon the truth. بَلْ تَكُونُ مَعَهُمْ عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Be with them upon the truth. فَمَنْ فَارَقَ الْجَمَاعَةَ فَسَيَأْتِي بَيَانًا. If a person goes against the jama'ah that's upon the truth, then a clarification is going to come with regard to this individual or his situation. وَلُزُومُ الْجَمَاعَةِ يَعْنِي عَدَمَ الْخُرُوجِ عَنْهَا وَالْإِخْتِلَافِ عَلَيْهَا. So what's intended by adhering to the main body of Muslims is that you do not go against them, and that you do not differ with them. قوله, or before that, because this is going to be brought up again, with regard to the different sects, the different factions, the different groups. This is something that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied. He mentioned that the Jews split into 71 sects. The Christians split into 72 sects. This ummah is going to split into 73 sects. All of them are going to be in the hellfire except for one. And when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who are they? He said, they are those who are upon what I and my companions are upon today. So that shows us what? That you have to be upon the same methodology in terms of your belief, in terms of your creed, your mu'amalat, your interactions with others, your character, your behavior. All of it has to be what the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were upon. So the different groups, like al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, like the brother mentioned. This is a group, a very dangerous group. Because this sect in particular, as other groups and other sects do, all of them say what? We follow the Quran and Sunnah. Everybody says it. They have al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, they call it al-Qa'idah al-Dhahabiyya. Right? They call it a golden rule or a golden principle. They say نتعاون مع بعضنا فيما اتفقنا عليه ويعذر بعضنا بعضا فيما اختلفنا فيه. Right? This is what they call their golden rule. We cooperate with one another in that which we agree upon. And we excuse one another with regard to that which we differ concerning. So, what's the issue with this golden rule? Huh? Innovation is just going to spread like a wildfire. But be a little bit more specific. We agree with one another in that which, or we cooperate with one another in that which we agree upon. Right? We don't have any type of disagreement. We cooperate. And we make an excuse for one another regarding those issues that we differ concerning. The brother just said, innovation is going to spread rampantly like that. Yes, but be a little bit more specific. What's the issue with that statement? Exactly. There's no allegiance or disassociation for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person says we're going to cooperate with people on those things that we agree upon and we're going to make excuse concerning those things that we differ, then that means you can cooperate with Sufis. You can cooperate with Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the ones who made this principle. You can cooperate with anybody. Some of these people, they have bid'ah that takes a person outside the fold of Islam. Like the Rawafid, Shia, they curse the Sahaba. They talk horrible about the Sahaba. They even talk bad about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say Jibril alayhi salam, he made a mistake and he was supposed to give the message to Ali and he gave it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam instead. Khan al-Risala, right? They talk horrible about the mothers of the believers, Aisha, and the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the list goes on and on. So if a person says this is an Islamic principle that every Muslim should adhere to, then you're basically saying that we can just cooperate with anybody. Why stop there? We can just cooperate with Christians and Jews. You know, it's a serious and it's a dangerous principle that has serious issues. We can cooperate with the Haddadiyya. No, mumkin. Perhaps we could say that. We agree, we cooperate with one another based upon what we agree upon, and we advise one another concerning that which we differ. But they don't say that. They say we excuse one another. So that means they don't have an issue. They don't have an issue, and that's clearly not correct. So the Haddadiyya, I just mentioned those individuals. The Haddadiyya are people who you would think are upon the Sunnah. And you see them, they have a beard, thobes are above the ankles. But what do? They speak bad about An-Nawawi, rahimahullah. They speak bad about Ibn Hajar. Some of them even go as far as to say that you should burn their books. Ibn Hajar, what did he explain? What book did he explain? As well known as famous. Sahih al-Bukhari. He has the most famous explanation for Sahih al-Bukhari. And An-Nawawi, rahimahullah, what book did he explain? Sahih Muslim. These people, they say that you should just burn their books because they made mistakes with regard to some of the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, with regard to those type of mistakes, the scholars say they're excused for it. They're excused from it. They're excused for those mistakes, and they're considered from the major scholars of Islam. We don't say they're mubtadi'ah, they're innovators or anything like this. Yes, they made mistakes, but at the same time, their works are to be benefited from.
Didn't they know we corrected mistake?
Allah knows best. I don't think that's the case. Allah knows best. I think you may be talking about Abu-Hasan al-Ash'ari. طيب. قوله فمن رغب غير الجماعة وفارقها فقد خلع ربقة الإسلام من عنقه. So this statement of the author where he said whoever desires other than the jama'ah. He said the jama'ah who? The people who are upon the truth. And he abandons them. Then he has thrown off the noose or the loop of Islam from his neck. The Shaykh, he says, Shaykh Fawzan, هذا نص hadith. Right? This is actually taken from the wording of hadith. This is a text from a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, من فارق الجماعة قيد شبر فقد خلع ربقة الإسلام من عنقه. He says ﷺ that whoever abandons al-jama'ah, the distance or a handspan, the distance of a handspan, then he has thrown off the loop of Islam from his neck. And this portion right here is going to be explained later on. فَهَذَا وَعِيدٌ شَدِيدٌ. This is a severe threat. When you hear that statement, he has thrown off the loop or the noose of Islam from his neck. This is a severe threat. فإن كانت المفارقة في العقيدة بحيث يعبد غير الله فهذا كفر. If this abandonment is with regard to issues of the creed, such that a person worships other than Allah, then this is disbelief. وإن كانت المفارقة دون ذلك فهي ضلال. And if it's something less than this, then it's misguidance. The abandonment that we're talking about. فَمُفَارَقَةُ الْجَمَاعَةِ لَا خَيْرَ فِيهَا. So abandoning the main body of Muslims is no good in it. وفي الحديث عليكم بالجماعة فإن يد الله على الجماعة. And it comes in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, adhere to al-jama'ah, for indeed the hand of Allah is over al-jama'ah. And another word in the hadith, it says ma'a al-jama'ah. The hand of Allah is with al-jama'ah. ولما أخبر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حذيفة بن اليمان بما يحصل من الفتن والتفرق قال له حذيفة ما تأمرني إن أدركني ذلك. And when the Prophet صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم informed Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, and who is Hudayfa? What was his nickname? صاحب سر Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was the one that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam told him the names of the hypocrites. And he used to inform him of matters that were going to take place in the future. And this is an example of it. When the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam informed Hudayfa about the things that were going to take place in terms of trials and tribulations and splitting, Hudayfa said to him, مَا تَأْمُرُنِي إِنْ أَدْرَكَنِي ذَلِكَ. What do you command me to do if this happens to me? Or this reaches me? قال أن تلزم جماعة المسلمين وإمامهم. This is a hadith. This is a hadith. Keep this in mind. This is a hadith. Some people, when they hear this, within themselves, they have an issue. They have an issue. They might not say it, but they have an issue. The Prophet ﷺ said, adhere to the main body of Muslims and their leader. فَالْجَمَاعَةُ لَا تَكُونُ إِلَّا بِأَمْرَيْنِ. So memorize these two conditions. The jama'ah is not established except by two affairs. الأمر الأول أن يكون منهجها الكتاب والسنة. That's the first matter. That their methodology is that of the Quran and the Sunnah. It has to be that of the Quran and the Sunnah. ليس منهجها مذهب فلان أو قول ولا قول فلان بل الكتاب والسنة. Their methodology cannot be that of the madhab of so-and-so or the statement of so-and-so. It has to be that of the Quran and the Sunnah. That's the first. الأمر الثاني أن يكون لها إمام مسلم يقودها. The second condition or the second affair is that they have to have a Muslim ruler, a Muslim leader that directs them. وَتَرْجِعُ إِلَيْهِ, and they refer back to him. لَا يُمْكِنُ أَن تَجْتَمِعَ جَمَاعَةٌ بِدُونِ إِمَامٍ. Right? There cannot be a jama'ah that comes together without an imam. لا بد من إمام يكون مرجعا لها. There has to be a leader that's going to be a reference point for them, someone that they can go back to. ولهذا قال لحذيفة تلزم جماعة المسلمين وإمامهم. This is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Hudayfa, adhere to the jama'ah of the Muslims and their leader. قال فإن لم يكن لهم جماعة ولا إمام. And Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, this shows his fiqh, his understanding. He wanted to get more clarity about this issue. He said, what if they don't have a jama'ah and there's no leader? What am I supposed to do? قال تعتزل تلك الفرق. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, stay away from all of those groups. And this is a sign of the truthfulness of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's speaking about something that didn't even happen, and he's telling him exactly what to do. And it happened exactly as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. All of these groups, all of these different factions, all of these different sects, they appeared just as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. أمره أن يعتزل تلك الفرق فلا يكون إلا مع جماعة المسلمين. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded him to abstain and to stay away from all of those different groups, and he should not be with anyone except for the main body of Muslims. ولا يكون مع جماعات غير جماعة المسلمين. He is not to be with those different sects and different factions other than the main body of Muslims. بل يبقى وحده على الحق إلى أن يأتيه الموت وهو على ذلك. Rather, he's to stay by himself, remain by himself as one person who's upon the truth until death comes to him in that state. فهذا فيه أنه لا يكون الإنسان مع الجماعات المخالفة لمنهج الحق. This shows what? That a person is not to be with those groups and those sects that are in opposition to the methodology that is the truth. وَلَا يَكُونُونَ جَمَاعَةً إِلَّا بِشَرْطَيْنِ. And there is no jama'ah except with the fulfillment of two conditions. What were the conditions? We already mentioned them. The first is that the methodology has to be that of the Quran and the Sunnah. What's the second? They have to have a Muslim ruler. They have to have a Muslim ruler. Is it a condition that the Muslim ruler is just and fair? Is that a condition? No. What's the proof? What's the proof? Because many Muslims today, unfortunately, because of the fact that, unfortunately, many Muslim rulers, they have oppression with them. They do things that are not correct. They'll say that this is the premises to make khuruj against them, or not to obey them, or not to listen to them. So what's the proof and evidence that is not a condition that the Muslim ruler is just or fair? It's many a hadith. Go ahead. Huh? Okay, so the brother is mentioning the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said that even if the person over you is a Abyssinian slave. Okay, so that's a little bit more, that's general. You could use that. What do you about to say?
I think it was the same one, even if they whip your back or something.
Now, there's a hadith that's found in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said even if he takes your wealth and he beats your back. There's another hadith, it's collected by al-Barbahārī Muslim. Now, this is the hadith. It's in Bukhari and Muslim. So as Muslims we know the most authentic book after the book of Allah is what? Al-Bukhari. After Bukhari is what? Muslim. So if you have a hadith that's collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, that's the most authentic hadith. Muttafaqun alayhi. It's the most authentic hadith. It comes in a hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ستكون أثرة وأمور تنكرونها. Most authentic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ informed the companions. He said there's going to be a preference that's going to be given to other people over you. This is with regard to the rulers. They give preference to some people over you. وَأُمُورٌ تُنْكِرُونَهَا. And there are going to be things that they do and things that take place that you're going to disapprove of. قَالُوا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ فَمَا تَأْمُرُنَا. The companion said, what do you command us to do? قال تؤدون الحق الذي عليكم وتسألون الله الذي لكم. The Prophet ﷺ said, fulfill the right that they have upon you. Fulfill the right that they have upon you, meaning the leaders. Fulfill the right that they have upon you. And then ask Allah for your right for you. Ask Allah for your right that's due to you. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say this? تُؤَدُّونَ الْحَقَّ الَّذِي عَلَيْكُمْ وَتَسْأَلُونَ اللَّهَ الَّذِي لَكُمْ. This shows what? This hadith is a clear proof about what? It shows that these rulers are not fair. They're oppressive. The fact that they give preference to some people over you, that's a form of dhulm. What is dhulm? وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعِهِ. You're putting something in other than its proper place. And the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, you fulfill the right that they have upon you and you ask Allah for your right. This shows what? That you still have to obey and listen to the Muslim rulers as long as it's not what? Disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's going to come. So the second condition is what? It has to be a Muslim leader. Na'am, the Shaykh Fawzan, he says, فَلَا دِينَ إِلَّا بِجَمَاعَةٍ. There's no deen. There's no deen without the jama'ah. وَلَا جَمَاعَةَ إِلَّا بِإِمَامٍ. There's no jama'ah except with a leader. وَلَا إِمَامَ إِلَّا بِسَمْعٍ وَطَاعَةٍ. And there's no imam except that he's to be heard and obeyed. Right? It's not unrestricted. The Prophet ﷺ said what? لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There's no obedience to the creation and disobedience to the Creator. So this is one of the things, unfortunately, you hear people constantly say. They'll say, this group of scholars or these group of people, that they, a'udhu billah, worship the rulers. Right? Whatever the rulers are doing, they don't disapprove of it. They don't say anything and they just go with the flow basically. That's not the case. Right? If the rulers are doing things that haram is clearly disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't approve of it. But at the same time, there's a way that the rulers are to be advised. A person shouldn't be on the minbar on Friday talking about the rulers in Saudi Arabia, for example. First of all, what is your objective behind that? Because if you truly want to give them advice, they're never going to hear what you said on the minbar in America. If you truly want good for the Muslims, they're never going to hear what you said unless you get the recording and try to send it to the government. More than likely, they're never going to hear it. Trust me, there's more pressing matters that are taking place right here in America that Muslims are in more need of hearing about. At any rate, when it comes to hearing and obeying the Muslim rulers, then we know that it's not unrestricted. As long as it's not disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are to be heard, to be listened to and obeyed as long as it's not disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هذا منهج المسلمين. This is the methodology of the Muslims. وهذا هو السنة التي يشرحها رحمه الله. This is the sunnah that the author rahimahullah ta'ala is explaining. وفي هذا نهي عن الشذوذ في الآراء والمخالفات. And this contains a prohibition when it comes to weird opinions, strange opinions, and things that are in opposition to the religion. وَأَنَّ الْإِنسَانِ يَلْزَمُ الْجَمَاعَةِ مَا دَامُوا أَنَّهُمْ لَيْسُوا عَلَى الضَّلَالِ. And that the Muslims are to adhere to the main body of Muslims as long as they're not upon misguidance. قَوْلُهُ خَلَعَ رِبْقَةَ الْإِسْلَامِ مِنْ عُنُقِهِ. Where he said he has taken off the loop of Islam from his throat. The Shaykh, he says, كان من عادة العرب أنهم يضعون للأغنام رباطا في رقابها. So this is something that the Arab of the past used to do. It was from their customs that they would place a noose or like a loop around the necks of the sheep. They will put a noose, right? It's a loop that goes around the necks of the sheep. حتى لا تتفرق وتضيع. So that they will not, wander off and become separated from the pack and get lost. وَيَأْكُلُهَا الذِّئْبُ. And so that wolves wouldn't eat it. وَهَذِهِ الْأَرْبِطَةِ تَكُونُ مُتَّصِلَةً بِحَبْلٍ وَاحِدٍ يَجْمَعُهَا مِنْ أَجْلِ الْمُحَافَظَةِ عَلَيْهَا. What was the purpose of this noose or this loop that was put around their necks? He said it would be connected to one rope. All of these loops that are around their necks, it will be connected to one rope, and it will gather all of them, and the purpose was to protect them. The purpose was to protect them. فشبه النبي صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم لزوم الجماعة بهذا الأمر. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم likened this matter of adhering to the jama'ah with this affair, meaning what we just mentioned in terms of what the Arab used to do. فإن الجماعة هي الرباط الواقي من المهالك. The jama'ah is the noose, or that loop that is a protective loop that's going to save a person from destruction. كالرباط الذي يكون في رقاب الأغنام. And this is like those loops that were put around the necks of sheep. يحفظها من الذئب ومن الضياع. It will protect them from wolves and from getting lost. So the last portion right here, قوله وكان ضالا مضلا. And the person is ضالا مضلا. ضالا في نفسه عن الطريق. Meaning that he is astray himself as it relates to the straight path. He has gone astray himself from the straight path. مضلا لغيره. ضالا في نفسه ومضلا لمن اقتدى به واتبعه. So the person has gone astray himself from the straight path, and he leads others astray. Whoever follows him, he leads them astray. قال تعالى ومن يشاقق الرسول من بعد ما تبين له الهدى ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين نوله ما تولى ونصله جهنم وساءت مصيرا. The meaning of the verse, and whoever opposes the messenger after the truth or after guidance has been made clear to him, and he follows a way other than the believers. Who are the believers that are being referred to in this verse? The Sahaba, the Tabi'een, Atba' Tabi'een. Those generations that the Prophet ﷺ praised, where he said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي. The best generation are my generation. Is he talking about Abu Talib or Abu Lahab? No. The Sahaba. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُم. Then those who come after them. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُم. Then those who come after them. The first three generations. These are the best generations. وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And they follow a path other than the believers. This verse right here is a proof for something. We alluded to it earlier. We said many Muslims, or every Muslim for the most part, even the Shia, they'll say they follow Quran and Sunnah. This verse right here, it adds something to that. It shows that we have to follow who else? The Sahaba. We have to follow the Sahaba. We have to follow the Salaf. The Salaf are the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, Atba' Tabi'in. We have to follow them. It's not enough just to follow Quran and Sunnah. Where are you going to get your understanding from? You want to get it from some clown in 2024 who went to Harvard and he has a PhD in Islamic economics or whatever the case is, and if you ask him about LGBT, he wants to tell you it's okay. You want to get your understanding from a fool like that? Of course not. So you have to follow the way of the believers, the Sahaba, and those who came after them from those first three generations. فَالْوَاجِبُ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ أَنْ يَتَّبِعَ سَبِيلَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So it's obligatory upon the Muslims to follow the way of the believers. وَلَا يُخَالِفَهُمْ. You cannot go against them. You cannot oppose them. وَلَا يَشُدَّ عِنْهُمْ. You cannot deviate from their path. And with that ends the point for tonight. Inshallah, the next point we'll take next week. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.